Welcome to the Innovation and Technology discussion. I'm Stephanie, your host for today's Beyond the Treatment Table, focusing on AI in healthcare. Our guest expert is Drew Contreras, the VP of Strategic Affairs for the APTA. Let's open up the conversation as everyone's coming in with a topic on how you're using AI currently. So I'm going to add a prompt in the chat. If you could just start with the size, so number of employees and locations of your practice, and then how you've currently been using AI, or if you have at all, and then how you want to use AI. So what you're hoping to learn here, and if you have any concerns about it that we want to talk about. So I'm going to put that in the chat, and as you're logging in, we're going to do cameras on. This is going to be an open discussion. You can use the raise your hand feature to come up and come off mute and jump in, or just put your questions in the chat. So I will add mine. See some familiar faces. Hi, Jane, Andrew. Hey, Claire.
Happy Thursday, everybody.
Okay, so at House PT, we have 8 employees, one of them here. Hi, Julie. We've got 2 locations. Right now, we're in the learning phase of AI. So I've been attending lots of different webinars. We've taken a course across the practice, just learning about it and the different models and how to understand it a little bit better. And, my goals are to optimize without taking away our creativity and individualism. Anyone want to jump in and say theirs out loud?
I can jump in. So Claire with Beyond Physical Therapy. I am the only employee at 2 different locations up here in Minnesota, and I'm definitely in the learning phase as well. I use Jane for scheduling and charting. So they had like a video on how AI listen to do the charts. And then to Stephanie about this week is, how it can help turn leads and things like that without losing that personalization.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, thinking about how it can help with social media, right? And that's where we were going, right, Claire? Yeah, you were breaking up a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure it came out clear.
Yes,
So,
social media and just like where can we implement it in the whole process from start to finish without losing that personalized care?
yeah. I'm just going to collect topics for now. We're not going to answer them yet. So we've got single mobile practice, not using AI yet. So just here to learn about it. William, we've got 8 therapists, so about the same size as me. No AI, and learning about compliance with notes. That's definitely something that we've heard multiple times. Okay. Anyone else want to jump in and share it out loud? Hey,
I
Martina.
will. I'm Martina Condis. I'm in a small 1 PT, 1 PTA clinic in Clarion. I've been in business for 2 years. I'm looking at trying to get, hi Jane.
And Martina.
I'm trying to get more AI because I might go to Prompt. They want me to go to Prompt, which is AI, and I'm using WebPT. So I'm looking at trying to get the best AI that I can do. My biggest complaint with AI is I like my own assessments. And I don't know that I'll be comfortable with an AI assessment. So that's what I was trying to gather more information on leaving behind my old thought process and coming aboard with being all excited about this new chapter to therapy. So thank you.
Jane, I'm interested to hear later on the debate on the pros and cons that came up with your students.
Sure.
You're right. Before we dive in, Drew, do you want to add anything to our intro? Do you want to talk a little bit about your background and why you're representing this topic this month?
Yeah. So, for those of you who have never met me or heard of me, my name is Drew Contreras. I'm a PT by background. I'm actually a retired DoD Army PT, 20 plus years. So the interesting thing about my background is through some of the positions I had a lot of access to kind of forward-leaning um, just technologies and things like that in practice. So um, then I kind of, after I retired out of the DoD, I came to work at APTA, and I really kind of sat in the crux point when all
Wanna
the
try to
digital
consolidate some of
companies
those
started
element
coming forward.
boxes too, if you wanted to.
Please. No. Ashley, just do, there we go.
Yep. So anyway, so the point is that now in my role, I really kind of externally face kind of innovation and what's coming forward for the profession. So kind of all those things land me to this point where I do a lot of interaction with the industry as much as with practitioners. So it kind of puts me at that cross point for the association of what is industry trying to do, where are they trying to go, what are clinicians looking for, what does the practice need. So it kind of puts me in that position. So that's why I'm here to kind of share what I know, or things that I see, or things that I think you should pay attention to.
Great. Do you want to start off with any information from the forum on AI in health and medicine that you recently attended?
Yeah, so I represented APTA at the National Academy of Medicine's Artificial Intelligence Forum. So the important thing to understand is that we're at the table with the AMA, Google Health, CVS Health, AACP, ANA. Like, we're at the same table as all the big players in this space. And the interesting thing is people would think like, well, this, is PT too small for that? The reality is musculoskeletal care is a huge, huge gap that everybody's trying to understand. So we fit really well in that. So being at that table, let's gives us the voice in the bigger, broader picture that is happening as the powers that be kind of shape policy and regulation of AI in healthcare. So just understand that like APTA is at that table, right? And I think it's important to understand that um, we're taking a much more proactive approach as an association as opposed to just waiting for it to come to us.
Anything specific that you want to highlight that came up?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to understand that nobody knows, right? Nobody has it figured out. You are not behind. So even if you're sitting here and you're like, look, I'm just in the exploratory phase, you're okay, right? I know if you go on social media, people will say, if you're not using 5 AI things, you're behind. You're going to be out of business next month. No, nobody has any idea what's going to stick. Right now, we are still in the phase where things are being kind of accepted, and we're not into the consolidation phase yet. Once we get into the consolidation phase where companies start acquiring everybody else, there's some of that, but we're not there yet as a whole. Then you will see that that's when you kind of have to know what's going on. But we're still at the point where, what I realized is none of the other associations have it sorted out. Even the large companies that have all the funding in the world, Microsoft still doesn't have it figured out. The administration had representatives in the meeting. They don't have it figured out. So it's just good to know that like you're not behind, but you need to be paying attention now.
So now let's get into, I think, the most common question here. If it's not all figured out and we're testing it with AI scribes, with our documentation, what are some things to think about?
So one thing I want to specifically tell anybody in this audience is, so APTA just put out a practice advisory on artificial intelligence. And so if you haven't seen that, go to APTA's website and download that thing. And the biggest reason is it kind of lays out for you what are some of the most critical things you should understand, specifically if you're using AI scribing, right? Because it's just another tool, but like any tool that a clinician uses, you are responsible for the outcomes or what that tool does or does not do, right? So understanding if it's recording, who owns that recording? How do you get access to it? If the patient wants that recording deleted, is that an option, right? There are legal and ethical considerations about actual recordings in states where there are two-party recording. You have to consent to it, right? Like there's a lot of questions that people don't really think about, but you have to, because it's your responsibility as the providing clinician. So I think that that's the first thing I would tell you is understand kind of those boundaries so that you can practice within the boundaries and not put yourself in jeopardy. I think that's the number one. Not only that, but make sure that you're providing to your patients ethical legal care, right? That they're comfortable with and understanding. I think that's the biggest thing I think you need to kind of right off the bat, not get yourself in a pickle. We're starting to see there will be lawsuits about this. It's going to happen, right? And so when it does, then the precedences will be set. There is no precedence at this time, but I would not recommend you be the first one to find out.
So hearing something like that might feel intimidating. I know for me, I might not want to be the first one to implement it. You know, maybe let Andrew test it out, and then if he gets in trouble, I know to stay away.
I think that it's just a conversation to have with any company that you're working with. So if they can't articulate these things to you, so for example, somebody was just saying Prompt, right? Like Prompt acquired numerous AI companies. Like Prompt has their stuff buttoned up really tight, right? Because that's their business. And any of these questions that like kind of these the practice guidance recommends, like any company should be able to answer these to you very easily, or it's already on their FAQs. What you need to be concerned about is, oh, found this company. They sound really great. They're a third of the price, right? Next thing you know, the data's going to Kazakhstan. You have no idea who owns it. You have no access to it. Like those are the things that you need to be concerned about. And those are the questions that like, they're very basic questions that any company should be able to answer. And then you should feel very good then about using any of those technologies with your patients, because we've kind of already laid out, here's the things that'll get you in trouble. And as long as you're clear of all these things, you should be good to go with it.
Perfect. And that reference is in the chat if anyone wants to grab it.
Nice.
Now, if we're talking about using it in Jane or Prompt or WebPT, the fear is a little bit lower than if we're finding our own third party.
Yep. I agree with that, right? And I think that now that doesn't mean, right, that there's not some great third party thing that's sitting there that just like, remember at one point, we had never heard of Prediction Health, right? We had never heard of Prompt. We had never heard of Jane. So like, it doesn't mean, but it just means that I think you need to do your due diligence in this space specifically because it is a trillion-dollar industry that everybody is going after. So I just think you just need to do your due diligence as a clinician and as a business owner specifically. I would just make sure that whoever's invoicing me, I know what I'm being invoiced for.
Perfect. Any specifics from the PTs that had the documentation concern? Anyone want to jump in right now? William, you got anything for me? All right, something else that came up on the admin side of things is, okay, if AI is documenting our notes, there's a little bit of a concern or fear that now it's going to take the next step and make a recommendation from these objectives that it's collected. And then what happens if it makes a recommendation that I, with my clinical experience and looking at different context, disagree?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're at the point, right, where AI at its best can tell you based on whatever information it's been fed, this is what the most likely next thing that would happen is, right? So when people get very, like when you use the term AI and language models, people get very like, oh, like it's all these things. The simplest thing I ever heard somebody say is what it really is it's the picker of the next best word. That's really what it does. So like it knows that based on whatever all this information, this is most likely the next word that is picked. And so for your treatment plans, like if you put in all these things and it summarizes that you came up with this, most likely this is what would follow. So now as a clinician, you are 100% responsible for the decisions. Whether you take the advice or you don't take the advice, it's you. You're the one who decides. So again, that's the licensure and the practice of medicine belongs to the clinician, right? And so, but the question becomes, if we get to the point where we have fed it the best evidence, it has the best clinical practice guidelines, it has the most recent research, does it provide you with thoughts and options for treatment that maybe you didn't consider? That might be a potential outcome of this, right? Like you thought I was going to do A, and it says most likely you're going to do A, but you should consider B based on this new information. You as a busy clinician may not have seen that new information, right? So there is a potential that it can provide you guidance that maybe you weren't aware of, or maybe you didn't know that there's this other option. But it will always come down to you're the clinician, it's your license, you're the one who makes the decision whether or not it happens. So I don't see us ever losing that, but I do think there's a world where it's going to tell you, you know what, you should consider this. Maybe this wasn't something you were thinking about.
That feels like a much more positive spin. It feels like when I text my group chat of, PT school
Yeah,
from
right.
10 years ago, hey, what do you think about this? I've got a complex case going on. More of a suggestion, brainstorming,
Right.
not so much, this is what I recommend you do.
Right. But there's also, let me go to the other side of that for a second, because I think that's a fair thing. So, you've got 8 employees, right? And you got one employee that doesn't seem to get great outcomes, right? And then when you start going like, boy, it's suggesting that you follow clinical practice guidelines. And they go, yeah, but I really like, doing glute massages. So I'm just going to do glute massages. I don't think we need to do any Therex at all. There needs to be no strengthening. We're just going to do glute massages, right? And so if the prompt is telling you like, hey, maybe we should strengthen this person, and you keep making the clinical decision to not, then you kind of have to own that. But then it puts you in that position of, well, it's my license. I get to decide. Yes, you do. And you can absolutely be kind of held accountable then to like you made poor clinical decisions, right? And I think that you're going to see this more in, for example, hard primary care medicine, right? Like, hey, look at this hypertensive patient. This is the primary medication for this. Why didn't you use that? You use this off-label thing. Well, I like the lunch the rep gave me, so I'm going to use this drug instead, right? Like, this is where, right, sometimes the tools they don't have as much bias as we do, right? And so it can kind of hold you a little accountable to that. But again, it has to be taken into context with all the clinical presentation and all the clinical knowledge. So it's just the other side of that, right? That like, I'm just having an honest kind of conversation with you guys that like, that's part of it.
See, it's interesting that you pointed out that it doesn't have the same bias as we might, because I was thinking the exact opposite. I was thinking, can we trust it to summarize research? Can we trust that it's not biased based on what it's been trained on?
Well, and so that's the question is, what was it trained on? Right? So if it was only trained on biased material, if it was only trained on one specific thing, if it was only trained on one textbook, that's all it knows. It knows nothing else. So that's the benefit of understanding when we have these clinical models that are fed, big hunks of medical research, big, like large, scale studies. That's the benefit of it. But if it's a small model that you're using that doesn't have access to big things, you're gonna have likely for more bias, right? And that's the danger of it, right? But isn't that any different than following a certain clinical guru's way of doing things without looking at other evidence? Like, it's no different than, well, I went to this one course and I approach things like this, And that's the only way, that's the only lens that I use. It's the same potential for bias that we already have. So I think it's just important to understand what's been fed into it, and how do you make those decisions based on what it's helping you.
So we're making sure that we're not training, using a model that was only trained by the glute guy.
Yeah, right. And I mean, right, that's to be fair, yeah, that's part of it, right? And then as the transparency becomes more and more, right, people, I one of the concerns that has been raised to me is that, like, well, physical therapy is not a big enough slice that they're going to get enough research, right? The physical therapy isn't, hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular, right? Like, the reality is, MSK spend is massive in our country and in other countries, right? Like, it is something that is a lot of people have a lot of interest in, right? So the models will be fed all the stuff. It's going to show up. It's not there yet. Like, we're still in the rising, we're still feeding it, but it will get to the point where there's enough information available for the models to provide you with good, solid evidence of decision making.
Ashley, your question was on research. Do you want to jump in? Have you been testing it at all? Is there anything specific that you wanted to talk about with the research aspect? And while we're waiting, because I know you might be multitasking, is there a point where you've seen a significant change? So was it January of this year where we saw increased adoption? Or so for example, at House PT, we noticed we weren't coming up on any answer engine optimized searches. So in April, I could go in there and I could write best physical therapy clinic East Village, and it would give me 10 answers. And when I clicked on them, those beautiful 10 answers did not exist. It was the laundromat, the church. Now in August, all of a sudden, we've started seeing our leads coming in referencing that they found us on ChatGPT. Is there anything that you're seeing?
It really switched with Chat 4. Once they went from 3 to 4, which is about that time frame. And that had to do more with before the models weren't allowed access to the internet, right? There was a time limit of, it was only allowed access to the internet up until a certain date. And don't quote me on this date. Let's just call it like 2005. So we couldn't access anything from 2005 to present. And then the administration changed the rules and regulations on that. And now it's go baby go. So that's why you see the massive change. It's been unshackled, and for better or worse, we will never go back to it not having all the information at once. So that's a good question, Martina. So will payments be dependent on AI recommendations? They already are. It's already happening. But guess what? You can use AI to rebuttal their denials, and that's already happening, right? So it's the AI conversation will be AI back and forthing, right? Like, no longer, it shouldn't be you sitting on hold with United for 4 hours. Let the chats figure it out amongst themselves. But it's already occurring, right? 100%. One thing I wanted to tell you guys, which you may or may not know, I'm going to drop this in the chat right here. So this Open Evidence is a really, really interesting AI model, kind of like a chat, but it is being fed everything by like JAMA, New England Journal of Medicine. So like, you can go in there and ask it some medical prompt questions. You have to sign up for it, and as PTs, you have free access. If you have not seen this thing yet, I recommend you carve out an hour and then just sit down and play with it. You will be astounded at the things that start showing up. I think it will change your perspective on what can this do for me as a clinician. So just a cool tool to check out. But I think, right, as you think about, if a lot of you guys are in that like sticking your toe in the water phase, right? This is this is not it's not an industry person doesn't own. This isn't an EMR companies or anything like that. So this was one that we talked about at the National Academy of Medicine about how are we supporting it, how are they getting their funding and things like that. So it's just a nice how does it compare to consensus? I think that it has more cooperation from the large publishers, the large feeders, if you will. I think that would be my answer to you on what's the difference.
I want to come back to the clinical side of things. So when you and I spoke last week, we were talking a little bit about the use of the force decks and making recommendations and things like that. So maybe if Steve, if you want to jump in here, I feel like you would have an interesting perspective. Do you have any?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share this. As I put in the chat, I was for a long time a senior manager executive on the provider side. And now I'm trying to shift my focus from chasing visits, units, productivity, diversity of coding, NRPEs to the technology side. And so, yeah, I've just over the last several months hooked up with a group called Figure 8, and it uses a digital functional assessment using wearable sensor technology to objectify muscle activity through surface mechanoreceptors, basically a surface EMG, and an inertial movement unit. So, you know, I'm 35 plus years into practice. Probably Drew and I are of the same generation here. But I really want to think about how we use technology. Our practices prior had used digital scribes, coding suggestions and edits, and I think that is incredibly valuable just because I think therapists are very habitual in their notes, in their charge patterns, and I don't think it's truly reflective of the care that's being delivered from a quality standpoint. And by quality, I'm not judging that. I'm talking about detail. Like most clinicians really limit the detail in their documentation, in their coding descriptions, and things like that. So I am a full proponent for these what I'll call documentation support mechanisms. But to everybody on this call, I fully agree that the responsibility is with the therapist. You can't just like let the scribe translate it for you. You go in and sign the note and be done with it, because in our practices, there is a level of accuracy, whether we want to call it 85, 90, 95%. But I would fully recommend that you don't just like get the transcription, sign off, and move on, knowing that the challenges are really about workflow and productivity and things like that. I get that, but we can't like let the machine run our practice and say, okay, I'm going to deliver the care, but I'm going to let the machine do my documentation for me. I also spent time as a former regulator, and I know that any case that comes in front of a state board is reviewed for whatever the issue is. But the secondary thing is always, let's look at the documentation to see if there's support. So that's a little long-winded, but I just want to share I'm fully supportive of these things, but we can't like turn the keys over to the machine and say that's it. And I just feel like the trend is moving in that direction. We have to be careful about it.
Yeah, and to your point on that, right? Like when there are a lot of plates and systems, right, that will tell you like, hey, if you get these certain readings or these certain things, we predict that this is what should happen, right? And to your point, like what these things do really well is predict potentially the next thing, right? So for example, this person jumping on this force plate with these asymmetries, they look a lot like people who have this condition, right? That does not give you permission to not evaluate the patient, to not confirm a diagnosis, or to say like, we really need to get an imaging study to confirm the loss of this, just because it's said that likely that's what it is. It's still your responsibility. But what it can help you do, right, is come to that conclusion quicker. It can help streamline your process of, okay, now that I'm evaluating them, okay, I see this is what I see. It's confirming where I thought clinically this patient was, and can then also help you with what's the next thing, what's the next decision point, right? But you cannot abdicate the role of responsibility.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Drew. And so as we think about this, at least in our ecosystem of using these surface EMG units, it's about precision of diagnosis. So again, we're using this as a tool to give us precision. You know, I love manual muscle testing and goniometry, but we got to move on from the last 75 years and become a little more precise. And in my mind, the precision of the data is the what, and what Drew just talked about is the so what. The data is telling us X about symmetry, about longitudinal muscle function, things like that. The so what is, okay, functionally, how does this change my plan of care or my safe return to fill in the blank? Function, sport, work, living home alone, whatever. I just feel like we got to get to this level of this precision that is the what, and then it informs us about the so what, is to be functionally oriented about getting people to a place with more, I'll call it objective and standardized data. But the so what is informing us as clinicians of where do I take this patient next, advancing their program or returning them to school or work or whatever. So yeah, well said, Drew.
Yeah, and then the other thing I would say is, right, like one of the things that our profession has to wrap its head around is that like I love me some manual muscle testing too, right? Like, and I used a lot of goniometers in my day, but like using a piece of plastic with Sharpie marks on it to measure joint movement is a terrible decision in this day and age, right? Like I understand we sent people to the moon with the slide rule. Yes, we don't use slide rules anymore. We have better ways of doing that. So as you think about, okay, so now we have better tools, but the inherent problem with that is the profession has to agree then on what are the gold standard measures from these tools, right? So our profession has not decided on a lot of these things because we haven't been forced to. But like a lot of other medicine, right? Like they know what is an acceptable A1C and what is not. That decision has been made. What is an acceptable level of hypertension and what is not, right? What isn't it like? These decisions have been made in lots of other areas of medicine, and we have not. And the truth is, even our orthopedic surgeon colleagues, right? Like, what is what really has to be repaired and what is, does it really need it? Like, it's still a lot of art. And I think that as we move forward as a profession, as we start talking about the value, we start talking about precision, right? Precision requires an agreement on what is the measurement, what's above and below the line, right? And then how do you acquire that measurement? And so I think that, I think that what's going to happen is as all these things come online, you're going to see this next resurgence in research that is going to have to answer these questions for us. What is an acceptable amount of torque generation standing from a chair to say this person is fine to go home from the hospital versus they're probably not going to be able to get off the toilet or the bed if I send them home because this is all they can generate. Like we all want to talk about falls prevention. It's Falls Prevention Week. Like what level of sway is acceptable? What level is not acceptable? Like we don't have that published and everybody agreeing on it. And even if we did agree on it, how do we measure it? So I think that, right, as we talk about these advanced models, right, when they start telling you, hey, well, what's the acceptable range of sway for this person? We don't know. Like, so we can't answer that. So it's going to force us clinicians to kind of step up a little more. So, yeah, we have to update some things. We have some work to do ahead of us. But I think it's exciting because you have better tools, right? We have better ways of doing it. We'll deliver better care. We'll have better outcomes. Our clinicians will be more empowered. It's good stuff. I think it's really positive moving forward.
Is anyone currently using these tools in practice and want to share their experience so far? not to call out my team, but I see our PTs on here, and we just did the VALD demos in August. So I think it's one thing to talk about it in theory and another thing to discuss what you're seeing when you actually measure a patient in practice and how you're interpreting those results.
And I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm just happy to share kind of what our tool does and how it measures this. So again, combination of surface EMG, designated muscles, and inertial movement unit, IMU, and basically we can either look at a point in time level of musculoskeletal activity, and again with surface EMG we can look at strength, we can look at symmetry, we can look at muscle activity, we can look at balance, if you will, or ratios of different muscle sets. And again, the idea is not to use it as the end all be all, but the tool to either say at this point in time this person is here, or more importantly, right longitudinally over 2 or 3 assessments every couple of weeks, we're able to more objectively say that this person, along with their functional activity, their PROMs, right, are making these advancements and being able to get there. And ideally, our goal is to create this somewhat new standard of objective and standard measures. I think, again, we think about all the stakeholders. A patient wants to know, am I recovering, and how do we show that people are recovering at what level? So it is the data. I think that's important for a patient to understand their journey, not just I feel better or I feel stronger, to objectify that. I think the referring physician sees value in that we can actually demonstrate that. I think the payer would want to see that we can actually map that out. And then it is really a safe return to fill in the function, work, sport, activity, even the sport test, right? The single leg hop test is 25, 30 years old. As a referring physician, a 16-year-old volleyball player, I would love to have a good level of confidence that that person is going back with objective and standardized measures. So again, that's kind of what we do. It's more precise and more detailed than some of the others. And I'm not putting a plug in there at all. I'm just trying, on this side of my practice, is trying to think about what does the future need, and how do we step in, to Drew's point, like other practices, with more precision and objective measures of how patients are recovering.
Thank you. I am going to selfishly shift the focus a little bit, and I want to talk about how we can use it to market our practices. I think one of the reasons I was averse to it at first is because I was seeing people, say, generate a blog post for me on this topic. And I don't necessarily want to take out the creativity, and with a passion for marketing, I want to teach people how to use their patient's language to attract people like that patient, to develop a niche, to show that they're specialized in this specific area. And I think initially it was being used kind of to take some of the workload away and took some of the creativity out. Jane might be able to speak to this with writing. Did you come off mute to jump in?
Well, I just have to run, but because you had said about what did the students say in the debate, I would say, I'm the assistant managing editor for Impact, and I think that there is a place for AI in writing, perhaps like getting you started, getting you together with an outline that's nice and organized. Maybe throw all your thoughts into Microsoft Copilot. You just throw them down and it can organize it for you in a nice flow. But I got to tell you, it's the first year we are having some complications due to AI. We are having submissions with the references. When you go to check them, they don't exist. So there's that. There is, people submitting things that are to AIs. You can tell by certain kind of prompts. Liz is really good at it. Liz Plowman, she's usually, she's writing full time and writing books. I mean, she's just a great writer, and she's just more sensitive to the AI. I'd probably be, I don't want to say duped, but not as, I don't recognize it as easy because I think, oh, that sounds good, because it does sound good. But then there's certain things that are very AI'd. And so we, that's not what this, and listen, we're a magazine, we're a publication, but I do understand that in research, I mean, that people are submitting things. There was a situation with a lawyer who, their brief was all AI and it was wrong. So, I mean, there's a lot of situations going on. So we are tackling it. We are educating, people on the board, and just, I think it goes back to, it's new. It seems like a great tool. It's a time saver. I can use it, but you have to know how to use it correctly. And we have the same thing in academics. I mean, this is all we talk about in academics, is how do you teach your students to use it in a wise way? How do you monitor they're not using it? Because if they're using it all the time, they're not going to learn anything. And they even said that in their debate. I mean, they're aware of that. So they did a great job on the debate. They talked a lot about the things that you all are talking about, security, data. They talked about, it's great with helping you maybe take your data and figure out, not figure out your diagnosis, but it can be an adjunct. But they talk about how, hey, we don't want it to take away what we do, because where's the critical thinking? And you don't know if the information you're getting is accurate. So they really hit all sides. And so that's kind of from 3 different areas, what the students said, academics, and also in writing. So those are the 3 areas that I'm tackling it. But it's been great for me as a teacher for some things. It's been great for me as a teacher. It's been very helpful. And now I have to go.
Yeah, thank you. Drew, anything on any follow-up there?
Yeah, I think that the biggest take home here, I think, is it's going to be used. It's going to be part of things moving forward, right? It's like when we were like, don't use the internet to get references. Like, go to the library and look it up. Like, yeah, right. Like, that was a conversation, right, at one point, right? This is never going away. This is never, you're never going back to not having language models and generative AI. So we have to understand it, learn to use it, because it's not going away in all these aspects, in education, in clinical practice, to Stephanie, to your point, to like marketing and communications, right? But like, it's never going to go away. Then you just have to understand, well, how does the model work? How do I use this tool for the outcomes that I'm looking for? And if you don't understand it, you just passively, right, will be subjugated to it. But if you understand it, right, and you understand, it's like social media now, right? Like, understanding, what does the algorithm pick up? Why is the algorithm only putting this in front of me, right? Because so many people are looking at it and it says, you were like these people, so you must want to look at this as well, right? That's how it works, right? So understanding how the things work lets you understand why it's coming in front of you. And I think that's the thing about whether you're full in or terrified of it or somewhere in the middle, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It's not going away. So you as a clinician and as a business owner and as a practicing whatever you are, academic, it's going to seep into your life.
One of the courses that I took this month preparing for this topic focused on prompt engineering. And I have kind of 2 areas that I want to ask you about. So first, it highlighted to me when a patient is potentially going to ChatGPT and asking a question, what context are they giving? And, as the clinician sitting in the room, I know how to weed through a subjective, rule out red flags. Do they know the question? So this happened at House PT, where a patient canceled their follow-up appointment because they put their MRI results in ChatGPT and it's contradicted our treatment plan. So what happens in that situation? How do we prepare our clinicians to handle that conversation?
Ooh, this is the inevitable thing, right? The like, oh, well, I have chat, so I don't need you anymore, right? This is where you have to decide what is your approach moving forward? Are you here to educate and work with your patient to say, I understand what information you got. Let me provide you some context as to somebody who's a subject matter expert who can help you process this and go through this, right? Or is this what's the FAFO? Good luck. Let me know how that works out for you, right? Like you're gonna have to make a decision about at what point do you want to intercede and help, or there's also a point at which complete opposite end of that spectrum is like you there's you can't treat stupid, is one of my good physician friends said, right? Like you do stupid things, I can't really treat it. I can't help you because you did a dumb thing, right? And so if the person does not want your critical thinking and your advice, I don't know why, I don't know how you would provide anything other than that, right? So that's a problem. It is. And I think that it's going to be like a lot of things. This feels a lot like a conversation that happened in like 2021 of like, we could just drink bleach. We could just put flashlights down our throats, right? Like, don't take Tylenol now. I struggle with this as a clinical scientist and as a clinician. Like I can only do so much, and I'm happy to help those people that I can work with. But there's also a point at which I think that this genie's out of the bottle, and you just it's gonna happen, and I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I appreciate that there's a point where you're like, okay, I can't change this person's mind if they don't want the help. I've been looking at it as this happened with WebMD, where patients have
Yep.
researched that it happened with Google, then it happened with TikTok. So, I think there is a certain type of person that's going to go to find, and maybe through my lens, I'm thinking about how can we educate patients on, if you don't have the proper context to give these models, your output is only as good as your input. And that's where
Yeah.
you need the clinician to steer it.
I agree. Andrew, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the same thing that Stephanie had asked, and I think you gave a good answer there. The other thing that I would add is, just as with all of these things that we've seen through the years that would detract from good evidence-based personal care education, I do think it comes down to those relationships, that trust that we build up. Sadly, I have a lot of young, kind of these millennial types that they would trust technology more than an old guy like me. But over a period of time, I do think as a profession, we just need to help bringing people back and saying, look, there is a reason that we did go to school and get all this education. There is something to be said about experience. And I'm not trying to completely undermine what you're finding out there, but right back to what you had said, Stephanie, is what you're getting is only as good as what you're asking. And I am here, I can look, I can see the computer doesn't have any clue what's really going on. Even an MRI, it has limitations. And I teach people all the time, you can have a negative MRI. That doesn't mean there's nothing wrong. You're hurting, you have problems. Your MRI is not picking up on that. So are you crazy, or is the MRI perfect? And so anyway, I just think that relationship that we have with people is still going to be a critical part of this caring profession that we're in.
I mean, so a lot of times whenever people ask me and I'm trying to answer something like this, I tend to like try to equate the current situation to a parallel one, right? So like for example, right? Like I can learn everything I need to know about investing money pretty much online, right? But I still have somebody help me with it. I don't do it all myself. I think that's a terrible idea because it's not what I do for a living, right? And so why wouldn't I take the information I get, ask somebody else who's smarter than me in this subject, say, here's the information I have. Given that, what do you suggest we do at this point now, right? And that usually tells, like, that's usually when people go, oh yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense, right? And then the other thing I always say is like, okay, so like if you don't need me, right? If nobody needs what I do, right? What do people who don't have resource restrictions, what do they do? So people with unlimited time, money, and access, who do they ask for help? Do you think they just ask chat? Do you think that that's the solution? Right? No, it's not, right? They go to professionals. Like, so like, again, I understand people who are trying to gather information, and I 100% always encourage my patients, go ahead, Google it, get all the questions, right? Maybe you're going to find something that I'm like, wow, you stumped me. And that happens every now and then. But usually, right, I'm pretty well versed in what we're talking about. And so them bringing you information and you being willing to say, let's talk about it, throw it down. I'll answer all the questions, right? I promise you, I will answer all the questions that the TikTok bros, the dude he's got a great 6-pack, but like really doesn't know anything about rehabbing you. I promise you I can answer everything that person has told you. So I think, right, resting on your professional laurels and being open to that conversation is the way to kind of move forward past that. But there's also a point at which I think as a professional, you understand, like, there's some people that like they're just going to go in this other direction. And I don't have the answer on how to deal with those folks.
Marcia, Sarah, do you have anything that you want to bring up as we come to the end? I want to make sure everyone has a chance. Martina, anything? Oh, Marcia, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think this has been great. I think it, creates a really good perspective. There are a lot of questions about, the best way to, I guess, utilize this to enhance your practice without kind of getting into the pitfalls. So this has been very helpful. Thank you.
I think, right, again, like the last thing I'm sorry, Natasha, you go ahead and.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to add, so I work hospital based and then I have small private. So in the small private, I feel like I have a little bit more free range to do whatever. So I've been using it, not a lot, but like when you talked about documentation with regards to like reimbursement. So I had one situation because I was new, billed an auto. They came back and the reimbursement was like half of what I billed. And their explanation was they were using Medicare fees. So then I went in, I'm like, well, let me make sure, like, before I accept this. Because at first I was like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. So then I was like, let me just research this. And then it had a clause like, well, anything done before this date goes by the original price. After this, blah, blah, blah. Because the woman is in her 70s. So I used the information I had, objective from my eval. I gave it to chat. I said, this is the law. Help me write a letter. It wrote me a letter, sent it to AAA, and they said, my bad, here's your money. So that's how I use it. And then on the other end, so once that happened, I said, okay, let me be a little bit more, because of where I work, we're very much like, write it this way so you get reimbursed. So then I was like, okay, when it comes to progress notes, let me write my medical necessity statement according to however they want it. So then I give it everything I have. I say, can you just write me an assessment that's medically necessary for Blue Cross or for Medicare or whatever? And here you go. And it's my words.
Yep.
But again, the language is such that hopefully somebody who's reviewing this says, okay, you're okay. So there's those two. And then going back to what Stephanie just said about people coming in with TikTok or chat or whatever, it's happening more often. In my personal situation, like both happened at evals. One was an older man who was like, I got a list of things and I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with this list. He also put in, back pain was sitting. So it just gave him like a bunch of cushions, something he should use.
Yeah.
Right. Meanwhile, so I completely changed everything. And then he's like, oh, okay. And I said, now, if you want a cushion, that's on you. Go ahead and buy whatever you want. But this is what I would do. So going back to the expertise, but then the TikTok, that was a younger person who was like, she came with all this stuff. And I said, that's fine. I'm not saying anything about it. We just also need to be mindful of who's giving you this information. So like, that's my personal pet peeve. Like, who's actually telling you this is the exercise you do for this, or this is what you do for this. So as a profession, I just think we could probably do, I mean, it's evolving, but educating on like literally what do we do? How can we help these different areas so that you're not trusting, even if it's not chat, you're also not trusting some person who doesn't have our credentials.
Well, and I think that that's a point that, it's good to kind of get to this point near the end. Kind of moving forward, right? I think that what you're going to find is that the physical therapy profession is going to be given the opportunity, right, to ascend into the role of more doctoring and coaching, right? Because people will have all the information that we provided information that people did not have access to. I provided you with a photocopy of stick people pictures of things you should do, right? People have all the information now. They have all the videos, they have all the stuff. They can go buy the cushions and they can go buy their massage guns and they can go buy all the stuff, but they don't know how to apply it. And what the value that you as a professional is, I can coach you to use the tools and resources to get the outcomes you want, right? And that's very much a coaching perspective, right? Like an amazing athlete can show up, but if they don't know how to apply the techniques, they're not going to be very good. They need a coach, right? So this person can show up with all the tools, have all the stuff, but they need a coaching mentality of like, this is how we will do this. I'm no longer a technician, right, who's just showing you how to do a thing. I'm now guiding you through this process, right, guiding you through this episode of care, right, which is very much a doctoring level of care and very much kind of that coaching mentality. And I think that that's the value that we provide. And I think that nobody does it better in non-surgical musculoskeletal care than we do, like period. There's nobody else no other profession has put in 100 years of hours and hours and hours working with human beings to know this is the way that we manage this or we treat this. So I think that I look at AI as the tool that will allow us to focus on the things that nobody else can do, and then can help me with can you get me paid for the thing that I did? Because they only wanted to pay me half. Could AI fix that for me so that I could focus on these are the exercises, this is the process that we need to go through? And so that's what I look forward to from it.
Thank you. I think that's the perfect reframe. And let's have AI write our medical necessity notes, and let's use this opportunity to educate on whether it's on blogs or TikTok or anywhere. From my marketing background, I will push all therapists to educate online so that what our patients find is actually from an expert. With that being said, we're going to wrap up for today. Thank you, Drew. I hope everyone got a lot of value out of this. The resources are in the chat, and this replay with the resources will be sent out tomorrow. Next month, we will have Chris Albanese speaking on financial management. And in December, we're going to have a special panel. So it's going to be 3 to 4 practice owners that have been a huge part of this series. And we're going to try to vary the size of the practice so that you get lots of different perspectives. Maybe someone who's small, maybe someone who's newer, maybe someone who's traditional and a little bit larger. And we're going to have that guest panel. That will be on December 4th, right after Thanksgiving. So no call over November, and then December 4th to end the year. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.